COVID-19, a deadly virus that has spread all around the world and is the root cause of the pandemic that has been happening for the last 2 years. Because of its highly contagious nature, schools have had to close down and take classes online. But how has this affected the work culture of educators in the sector? How has it affected education as a whole? In order to find out more about this, I went to the University of Samratulangi, specifically in the English department, and interviewed a couple of lecturers there to find out more about this problem and how it has affected them personally. Thank you, Prof. Golda, for coming out here and teaching me about the wondrous world of education. So this pandemic has affected all of us, so I'd like to ask you a few questions regarding the pandemic and about education as well. So first off, how would you define an educator, and what does being an educator entail?
Yeah, definition of educator then, right? Yeah, for me, well, we can start from the root of the word itself. Educator, actually, it comes from a verb to educate, meaning then, basically to teach. Yeah, basically to teach. So this is to give a model, to demonstrate knowledge that we have as teachers or as educators to students. But I guess it's not just to teach students in terms of the knowledge, but more than that, as educators, we also try to encourage students to develop themselves, yeah, to create, to develop the students' knowledge and in a creative and effective way.
I would like to share my experience as an educator. So as an educator, it's not only about the guru or a teacher or lecturer or whatever that give you a knowledge or something like that, but it more focused on how to be a good attitude, behavior, or be a good person actually. And yes, I think that's all.
For me, educator is someone who can educate, of course, who can educate students, but not only educate students, but although we still call them educator, but for educator, I think the most important thing is not only educate the students, but also to guide the students to do what are the important things in education atmosphere.
So, as an educator, how would you describe your work and classes went about before the pandemic?
Before pandemic, I taught the class with the flexible way, in more discussion with students, and also a task or assignment with oral tests.
Before the pandemic, in offline classes, usually we can meet each other, we can see each other face to face, and usually between student and teacher or educator, we will know more the students if we compare when we have online classes.
Before the pandemic, it seems like it's a normal thing. Yeah, we as educators and as lecturers, we come to classes, give materials to students. Not just giving materials, but we also encourage them, giving them motivation, and then at the end, of course, we assess. We evaluate students' work and students' learning.
And how has the pandemic affected how you work as an educator?
Not really changed, but challenging also. But because we have to meet students through virtually, and I think that's a good idea for students to give their ideas through virtually or online discussion, because we have different view of teaching and learning through online.
This is really a pandemic has affected very much in my work as an educator. Basically, the influence is on the interaction between me as an educator and also my students.
That's there's one thing to say that in online classes, students are motivated to do everything individually, because usually, for example, in Unsrat we have e-learning, and we will put the material on it, and the student will read it by themselves. And sometimes, if they need more knowledge about it or more explanation, they must search by themselves by googling the information on the internet, and then they have a flexible time to do not only to do their assignment, but also to, of course, to read the material and to watch the material when the educators give video to study.
What are some of the differences that you have noticed between educating students before and after the pandemic?
Yeah. In my opinion, globalization is more play important role through this time, especially during pandemic, because student and also teacher can access more, more source of knowledge online or virtually, and have more time to multitasking. Yeah, something like that.
Before pandemic, yeah, you have experienced it. We met in the classroom, we interacted, and we have, let's say, the atmosphere was not the same as when you are learning in Zoom, right? Yeah. So I think that's the main main difference or influence that we can have in after pandemic.
In online classes, we only see them by Zoom, and sometimes they close their camera and we cannot see their face, and we cannot see whether they notice what, the subject when the teacher when the educators talk.
What are your thoughts on Zoom classes? And do you think that they're effective in teaching students?
In one way, I guess Zoom classes are effective. What I meant by this is that as a teacher or as an educator, we can prepare material in an efficient way. Yeah, we can prepare it, of course, from our home, and then what's the important thing is that each student, from my perspective, have direct what is it called? We can say they can see directly the material, right, from their gadget, of course, their laptop or their handphone. So it's individually connected, yeah, with the students. However, we cannot we cannot really know for sure whether students understand what we teach them, yeah, what we give them, because there's no interaction, no yeah, no face-to-face interaction. Usually, students, due to technology and also signal internet connection, they I cannot force them to all of them to open their camera, so I don't really know what is going on in their surroundings. Yeah, that's the thing that I guess the let's say the disadvantage of Zoom classes.
In Zoom classes, in some parts, I think that's effective for the students. For students who are creative, I think that's good. But for the passive students, when they only rely only on the explanation from the educators, I think it's not too effective because you only get small parts of the material from the from the educators if they only study by Zoom.
In some ways, yeah, indeed, it effective learning through Zoom, but we don't have to more focus about Zoom meeting, but we also have to focus on how to give or deliver the message or the knowledge or the ideas to student, and also how to student give feedback to the lecturer also. And that's the point, I think, to make a good relationship with a student or among student, among lecturer.
And how has the pandemic affected your relationship between students?
Uh, yeah, yeah. Pandemic, yeah, affect the relationships between students and educators because yeah, we cannot talk directly to the students. We cannot see um, what their expressive faces when we talk because yeah, as I said before, that sometimes they close the camera, so we cannot know the real expression from the students.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Because uh, I guess there are two benches that I haven't met the students, yeah, in real life. I just met them in Zoom meeting, yeah, in Zoom classes. Um, the the influence here is on the, I guess, like I said before, as an educator, we have the responsibility to give students good values, yeah, the moral, uh, how we can motivate students, encourage them. In Zoom classes, this is limited. Yeah, we cannot directly talk to the students one by one. Yeah, it's always yeah, in class as a whole. But in if we can meet students one to one, one on one, then we can know their relation, their reaction. We can know even if there's something wrong with them in case of they don't understand and the materials that we are giving them. I think yeah, that's the bad effect of Zoom, yeah, or online learning. We cannot really go into the students' life, but here, of course, the life as a student.
Yeah, so far so good because it's not because we get the familial bond. Beside, we have to share. I have to share the knowledge because I have to give some instruction in more detail, in more flexible way through students. So I think that's good. So not hard really to me to share the ideas to student.
So, to ask the final question for this interview, do you think that work culture in the education sector will go back to how it was before the pandemic, or will things be forever changed even after the pandemic ends?
Hmm. Well, I guess it's not going to be the same. I mean, it's not going to go back as what before, yeah, as before the pandemic. Why? Because now the situation is different. Yeah. Right now we are in the era of digital globalization. Everybody is in the in. I mean, you can say that your life is in your hand. Yeah, with all the gadget thing, and this of course will affect the education system. We cannot really go back again just as we were in before pandemic. So I guess it will be, what is it called, hybrid learning, when we learn not only through digital, yeah, in for example Zoom meetings, but also face-to-face interaction, because for sure there are advantages in Zoom meeting, learning through Zoom meeting, and there are advantages also when you meet the students face-to-face in giving your material or your instruction. Yeah, I think it's going to be, it's not going to be the same as it was before pandemic.
I think student and lecturer should go easy with the technology, but because it doesn't matter about the before or after pandemic, but we have to go, or we have to, yeah, we have to follow the technology. I think that's the point at all.
No, I don't think so. I think it will change. It will change the atmosphere, because even though we will pass the pandemic later or maybe next year, but we don't know that, the situation has already changed, and not only because of the pandemic, but because of the development of information technology. Because in Unsrat, before pandemic, Unsrat has already prepared e-learning, not because of the pandemic. Yeah, before, because we know we had pandemic started on in 2019, right? But Unsrat has had already prepared it since 2018, and in 2019 we have already applied some subjects by e-learning. So I think even though we have already passed the pandemic, but uh, the, the way of learning and teaching in Unsrat, and in general as well, will change.
Okay, thank you for your time, Angie.
Yeah,
I
my
really appreciate
pleasure.
it, and thank you for teaching me about the world of education. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Jason.
Thank you for your time, Angie. This was very eye-opening for me, and thank you for your eye-opening answers. God bless you, Angie.
You're welcome. God bless you too.
Well, thank you for your time. This was very eye-opening for me in this pandemic times, in this pandemic era, how educators can deal with these problems.
Yeah.
And thank you for your time. And yeah,
Yeah, one more thing. There's a saying, you need to keep adapting to survive. And it also goes to us as educator and to you as students.
of course.
Surviving, adapting. Right? Okay?
Mantap. Well, there you have it. I spent today with lecturers from the English department in the University of Samratulangi, and I feel like I understand how this pandemic has not only affected students, but also educators. Educators now have to have a strained relationship with their students, who they can't actually meet because of this pandemic. And while it's tough for them, they also have to adapt to the growing, changing climate, especially in this digitalized era. But it can also help them learn to adapt and grow as a person. That's all from me. Thank you for listening.